All righty. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Locklear. I am a web developer, IT project manager with the Extension Foundation. If you're not familiar with the Extension Foundation, you can go to extension.org. We're a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to serve the cooperative extension service. Probably, if you've heard of Ask Extension, which was previously Ask an Expert, that's one of the apps that we maintain. I've been with the foundation for, I guess, going on, 13 years now, 12, 13 years, and was originally hired as a web developer and worked on Ask an Expert, and have sort of moved into the project management space for the last few years. Spend most of my time now with ExtensionBot. I'll throw in a plug at the end about ExtensionBot, which is our generative AI tool that is trained on cooperative extension only data. And again, I'll take a slide at the end and just share a little about that. Before we get started, I have a poll here. Launch that. Hopefully everybody can see that. If you would make a choice there, or respond to that poll, just to give me a sense about where folks are at. You just never know. I give presentations like this all the time, and folks are often all over the map. Okay, so it looks like, let's see, can I share results in poll? Yeah, share results. So it looks like we've got a couple of folks who use it daily, a couple of folks weekly, and then another two who have used it but don't use it regularly. So it's good that, kind of curious if there was anyone who hadn't used it at all. So that's good enough. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's try and share my desktop, and then I'm going to slide this down here, and then let me go into slideshow mode. How does that look for everyone? Good. All right, awesome. All righty. This is actually, I gave this talk at NETSI last year, and so I modified it just a slight bit for this. But I should give some attribution to North Carolina. I think it's the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. I pulled a bunch of slides from there. They had a really good they have a really good presentation that they gave on prompt engineering. So I actually sort of borrowed a lot of their some information they had in slides. And so some of this is sort of geared toward education and teaching. So if you see that, it maybe doesn't 100% fit the cooperative extension service, but I think it'll still be applicable for what we're doing. My image you see here is, I originally created this. I used DALL-E to do this, which is ChatGPT's generative AI tool. And the idea here is that, like, I wanted to, when I talk about prompt engineering, the idea I want to get across to people is it's really up to you and up to us to manipulate the technology to sort of do, give us what we want, right? We hear a lot. I feel like we hear a lot about, a lot of fear around AI and what it's going to do to us, but like the humans are the ones that are driving the technology. So really what I want to get across, at least in this from a prompt engineering standpoint, is that, we have the ability to sort of manipulate this. I like to think of a wrestling match and a wrestler sort of imposing their will on the other, on their opponent. And that's the sort of image that I have about, about the way we interact with AI, and the way we do that, the way we impose our will, is through prompt engineering. And so we'll talk more about prompting and what that means. All righty, so this is just sort of a roadmap of what we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about prompting versus keyword search. You've already heard me use the word prompt maybe five or more times, so you'll hear that term a lot. But we'll sort of, often when you're talking about something this new, it's often helpful to talk about something that maybe you're already familiar with, and like Google searches and keyword searches are a term we're already familiar with. So it's sort of like that, but not quite the same. So we'll sort of compare and contrast those. We'll talk about limitations, concerns, ethics. This craft prompting framework, again, I think that was developed here in North Carolina, but I think it's a nice way to think about prompting and what it means. So we'll talk more about that, and then we're going to practice. Hopefully you're willing to do that. You can You can minimize your sort of Zoom window, and hopefully if you have access to ChatGPT, Gemini, any of those things, let's do some put fingers on keyboard and do some experimenting and hopefully share back out, and then finally we'll finish up with some questions. All righty, so first, before we talk about generative AI specifically, let's talk about sort of AI in a more general way and sort of where it falls in the hierarchy of different things. We've been using AI is not anything new. AI has been around for a decade or more now. If we all use email that has spam filters, that's AI. If you have motion detection on the camera in your Ring doorbell cam, that's AI. So AI is really this umbrella of various technologies that are out there. And then sort of down at the bottom of this image, you can see generative AI is there, sort of falls within that. And it's sort of this combination of machine learning, deep learning, and then model training too. And that's really that's really the what sets generative AI apart is this idea of it being trained on data sets. I spoke at an AI conference last year, and there are a bunch of sort of old AI hands there, folks that have been working in the machine learning for the last 20 years or so. And it was interesting talking to them. They, when ChatGPT broke, I guess fall of 2022, they really weren't that impressed with what it was able to do. And I was sort of surprised by that. And when I talked with them, for folks who've been working with AI for a long time, the conversational part was not really a big deal. Really the difference in ChatGPT and why it made the splash the way it did is the breadth of knowledge that it had. Folks in machine learning had used tools where it was trained on a sort of bespoke, very finite set of data, and you could have conversations about that. But this idea of ChatGPT being as knowledgeable about everything, that was really what set it apart from other tools up to that point. So I think that is a part of, and again, I'll talk about ExtensionBot some, and we're trying to do something similar there with cooperative extension data sets. All righty, so generative AI is not Google. So we've all, I think we've all become comfortable with what a good Google search is and sort of how that works. And search engines search for content that already exists and then return those results based on search terms. So, keyword search is a good way to think about that, right? You put in certain terms, and then the search engine looks for instances of those specific terms, one or more terms, and then returns results based on that. Generative AI or large language models generate new content, and that's sort of the key there. New content by synthesizing data that it's trained on, and then based on a prompt that you give it. So, I guess in a way we're using that term new data kind of loosely in that it's taking data that's already there, data that's been trained on, and then sort of giving you a new version of that, again based on the prompt that you were giving it. So that's the best way to sort of contrast keyword search and a Google search versus generative AI. So let's look at an example here. I live just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And so this first example is a Google search, right? Asheville Italian restaurant top 10. And that's a pretty good Google search, right? That's going to give you what you want. You're looking for, maybe the best top 10 Italian restaurants in Asheville, North Carolina. Now, let's contrast that with the second example I have here. I'm looking for a good Italian restaurant in Asheville, North Carolina. Do you have any recommendations? So sort of, I mean, in some ways it's the same, but it's very different, right? This is a sort of complete sentence. It's natural language. So, really the key here, and what I tell people is you really need to interact with these tools the same way you would a human being, right? And I mean, the example I use is, you wouldn't walk up to someone on the street and say, Asheville Italian restaurant top 10. They probably jump back and look at you like you were crazy, right? But if you walked up to them and said the second example I have here, that would make sense. So really a good rule of thumb is to again interact with these tools, at least from a generative AI standpoint, interact with them the same way you would another expert in the field. And the way I like to describe generative AI is like, we all have a friend who's a doctor, we have another friend that's a lawyer, we have another friend that's a mechanic. And so all these experts, and so if you have a question about a certain thing, you go to that person. So generative AI tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, it's sort of like having that best friend who knows a lot about everything. And so when you interact with them, though, the details are important. And so when we talk about the craft framework, we'll get more into what a good prompt looks like. Okay. So how is generative AI different? So and I'm making specific reference to ChatGPT here, but again, this sort of applies generally to, again, ChatGPT, Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, Perplexity. Again, there's many tools out there, so this all sort of applies to those. But again, trained on large database of books, articles, and basically the entire internet. I mean, we often don't know. That's some of the mystery around generative AI too, is we don't exactly know everything that it's trained on. And then again, can synthesize all of that data, transform it into text, generate output in natural language based on user input. And the sort of GPT part of ChatGPT is the generative pre-trained transformer. All right, limitations and concerns. So bias, I always like to have this slide in when I talk about generative AI. Bias is there. Large language models are trained on the entire internet, and so there is inherent bias there. Often, I would encourage people to provide feedback. All of these tools have the little thumbs up and thumbs down there. I don't always do it as often as I should, but I usually try and give feedback if there's either particularly good answer or particularly not so good response. And then the other note I have here is take caution not to disseminate biased information. So really it's up to you. None of these tools are silver bullets. I mean, although to be honest, they certainly feel that way. I leverage them a ton, and it's completely changed the way I do work. But that being said, like, it's up to us as the humans to you need to review everything you get. If you have questions or you need to fact check things, it's sort of your responsibility to do that. This is a tool just like the internet or anything else out there. Ultimately, if your name is on it and you're disseminating it, then you're responsible for it. Hallucinations, I like to mention. Hallucinations is the term we use where generative AI can sometimes produce false facts, sort of in air quotes. And you know, like sometimes for fun, I'll just try and ask things that like don't make any sense just to see what kind of response I get, because 99.9% of the time it will give you a response to any question you ask. And so what's inherent in that is that it will respond with bad information. And so really what that comes down to is that there's not, it's often not it's all wrong or it's all right, is that it's usually a mixed bag. Right now, I mean, if I just like generally, if I throw a number on the sort of quality of the responses I get back, generally it's 85 or 90% right, but 10% wrong is not great. But so it's often a good starting point. I teach part-time at a local community college. I teach web development and software things there. And yeah, just this past week we did that. I've made that part of what we'll do is part of the assignments are using generative AI to get solutions to problems, but then looking for, part of what we do is look for where it got things wrong. And again, it's usually 80 or 90% right, but usually there's that 5 or 10% that it doesn't quite get right. So that's those that I think that's going to be inherent. These tools are created by humans. Humans aren't perfect, so there's going to be imperfections there. And then privacy is the last thing I have there. I mean, the way this is stated here, large language models should not be trained on personally identifiable information. You all probably aren't training your own large language models, but still, one of the things to think about is, be mindful of the data you're putting in these tools. Now, that being said, I had, just for the foundation, we had a conversation with the foundation about, is it okay to put, what information is okay to put in these tools? I mean, the way I'm treating these tools now, if it's something where there's authentication there, right? If you have, and you can use Chat GPT without logging in, but I think there's limitations there. But I think of it just like Google or any other tool, Gmail or Microsoft Outlook, is that, if these are authenticated tools, when you log in, you're seeing, it's your data. We're trusting these third-party tools the same way. And so ChatGPT or generative AI is no different than these other large tech companies out there. If you're uploading documents to Microsoft or Google, it's really no different than uploading them to Gemini or GPT. I mean, if things are all authenticated and they're associated with your account, then that we're trusting these companies to keep our data private. All righty. So prompting is not searching. So again, this idea of a keyword search versus a prompt. So sort of starting at the left and moving to the right there. The first example, the Google search term, lesson plan for growing hops. Probably not a bad Google search. It's probably going to give me some pretty good results on how to grow hops. All right. Sort of the next level up, the one I have labeled as a weak prompt here. Create a lesson plan for new hop growers that includes location and hop variety. Okay, that's not bad. But then the last example I have here, I would consider this a sort of good or an effective prompt. I'm a cooperative extension agent teaching a class on growing hops. Create a lesson plan that includes instructions for new growers on the best location and variety of hops to grow. Okay, so I mean that makes sense, right? The context, and again, when we talk about the craft framework, context is a big part of that. But you're sort of giving it this full. I'm making this sort of globe with my hands here, but you're giving it the sort of full context of the question you're trying to ask, and so that's really everything when it comes to sort of prompting and manipulating these tools to have it give you the good, the response back that you want. That's why I say that it's not really a silver bullet, in that, these tools aren't omniscient. They only can respond with, things that you're giving them or you're prompting them to give them back. So often a good prompt is it's not a trivial thing to write a good prompt. It's going to take some sort of gray matter for you to sit down and think about the right way to craft it. All righty. So what is prompting? Prompting is communication with a generative AI. I need to move this out of the way so I can see. Prompting is communicating with a generative AI model with natural language. So again, I want to emphasize this part of this natural language, or again, like you would talk to another human being. And I'll pause real quick for any questions. We've got a relatively small group here, so feel free to unmute if you have questions at this point. Okay. All righty. So this is again, this is something that North Carolina Public Instruction came up with, but I think it's effective, and they call it the CRAFT High Power Prompt, or the CRAFT framework. And so the CRAFT stands for, the C is context. So context, again, add clear, specific details to help AI complete the task. The R is role, so you can assign AI a role for more targeted response. The example they give here: you are an excellent 8th grade math teacher. Audience, provide details about the audience. 6th grade students, 8th grade parent, high school teachers, 4-H kids or 4-H group. Often when I create prompts, or when I'm prompting things with regard to the college class I teach, I often say community college there, because I'm going to get a different response as opposed to if I say a 4-year university or a graduate class. So again, audience giving that prompt or including that piece of information is important. Format they have here. This sort of just depends on what you're looking for. So the output format is what we're talking about. It could be length. If you ask again a lesson plan, the prompt that I gave about hops and a lesson plan, are we looking for? Is this a 16-week course? Is it a single 1 day, 1 hour course? So the length, giving it that context with regard to length is important. And then the other things are sort of fun things, but again, it just depends on what you're wanting to do. Style might be important, rap, song, HTML. Are you looking for code or something more technical? And then the last thing they have here, the T, is task and tone. And the example, or the way they explain this, what you want, the action that you want the AI to perform. Do you want it to evaluate, create, edit, revise, brainstorm? And we'll look at some more examples of that. All righty, so this is this is the example I have here of a craft power prompt, and it's a, a little more sophisticated version of what I showed you earlier. But I'm a cooperative extension agent in Western North Carolina. I've been asked to create a presentation for people interested in planting Christmas trees. I need to create a 40-minute presentation to prospective farmers and landowners about what it might take to start a Christmas tree farm and any issues they need to consider before starting such an endeavor. So again, I'm making the globe with my hands. I've sort of got a full context, and you can see all the different things. You can sort of see different parts of the craft prompt here, but certainly context is there. Role is there. I mentioned that I'm a cooperative extension agent. The audience is there. I'm giving a presentation to prospective farmers and land owners. Style or length is there. I need a 40-minute presentation. So again, you're sort of giving all of those various pieces to it. And again, you can imagine if you were sitting down with someone and you were having a conversation with a Christmas tree expert. These are all of these same pieces of information you would want to share with the expert that you were asking to give you information. You would sort of share those same details with that person. All righty, so it's your turn. So what I want you to do, and I'm going to ask some folks to share out too, and I'll be doing this on my end too. If you, so let me stop share. I'm gonna stop sharing just because I know it's easier sometimes. Zoom takes up the full screen, so you should be in your Zoom window. I think you should have the red, yellow, and green buttons. You can click the let's see, you can click the yellow button, and I think that's going to make it small. So if you click the yellow button, that'll give you the little single screen. And what I'd like you to do is, if you have a particular AI tool that you like using, feel free to use that. You should be able to go to chatgpt.com, and you don't need to authenticate. I think you have they have a limit on how many conversations you can have, but I think if you go to chatgpt.com, you can use their you can use their you can use the interface there. But what I'd like you to do is come up with a prompt. You all have different areas of expertise, so I don't know what all those areas are, but what I'd like you to do is sort of think about a prompt that would be germane to your work, and enter that, and then I'd like to come back and share that. I'm going to come up with a prompt on my own. So let's just take maybe 3 minutes. I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. Let's take 3 minutes to do that, and then when we come back, let's share. I'm going to ask one or two folks to share. Okay, one minute. Alrighty. I'll share mine first. I actually used a previous, let's see, I actually used a previous prompt that I did. This was a writing. I'm going to share a couple of more examples earlier, but this is ChatGPT, and we have a quarterly newsletter that we send out for Extension Bot, and so, you know, folks have all kinds of workflows. Generally, what I'll do, this is a good example of it, is I started a Google Doc. I sort of did an initial draft of the newsletter, and then I pasted that into ChatGPT. And if you can see, my prompt here is really just here's a quarterly newsletter we're sending out about Extension Bot. Feel free to wordsmith it. I will say for the context part, I'll talk about this later, but ChatGPT has a feature where you can actually basically you're telling it about yourself and you're telling about your work. So I've already prompted, or I've already told ChatGPT about Extension Bot. In fact, it has extensive knowledge about it. So I just want to make that note. That's why I'm able to reference it here without sort of not giving it full context for what Extension Bot is. It basically already knows what the tool is. But then I pasted in what I had for the what I had came up with for the newsletter, and basically just ask it to wordsmith it, and then it gave me this. So the nice thing is it's gonna I find with writing tasks like this, obviously it's going to correct any misspelled words, anything like that. But if you sort of missed anything in the larger context, it does a good job of sort of filling in holes like that. At least I know one of the things I run into with tasks like this, I get very myopic with regard to certain topics, and I may miss sort of larger context kinds of things. So I think ChatGPT does a good job with that. Anybody willing to share any, and I can stop sharing and allow you to share your screen, or if you'd like, or you can just maybe tell us what your prompt was and then what the response you got was.
I'll do one.
Okay.
What I did was I'm an extension educator early in rural Nebraska, specialized in early childhood. What is the top 3 concerns of parents with children 0 to 5 years of age? So then it came up with 3 concerns and concerns, parents, information, and then your role. But then I also went down to the next conversation of saying, let me find my conversation. Create 3 newspaper articles on the number 1 topic you suggested to help parents answer these questions. So then it came up with 3 articles that was pretty well on target and used CDC government information for early childhood. And then I was going to go into some other things like radio and social media and see what it would come up with from those 3 things.
Okay. Yeah. I'll often do something like that, and then again, like I'll take the example I got here and then paste that back into my Google Doc, and then I might make some final edits there if I feel like it's good enough, or I may sort of go back and forth. But okay. Anybody else want to share? Okay. All righty.
Cheryl and
So,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Jamie.
Just quickly, Cheryl and I are trying to adapt a program we've done previously to high school students instead of
Mhm.
adults, and it has to be in a shorter time frame. So I asked
Okay.
it to help us with that, and I still need to go through the response because it's pretty long, but
Yeah.
hopefully that will
Do
be helpful.
do you have material? I'm assuming you have materials for that current class now.
Yes.
And
And
what
that's what
form
it was
are they in?
taking me a while. PowerPoint. It was
Okay.
taking me a while to get that connected to upload.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. If you like, that's an excellent example of, hey, you've already got some content here. You sort of build it for a different audience, but the content you have is good, but you just need to go in and sort of change maybe the audience that it's for. ChatGPT has the ability to do this, and other tools to do too. But you can either, you can directly point it to websites now. So if that content or the information is web accessible, you can paste a link in with your prompt and it'll go sort of read or parse the information that's at that website. Or again, if you have a PowerPoint, Google Doc, Word document, anything like that, you can also attach that to the prompt too. So that's something I've been taking advantage of. Okay.
So Mark, I did the same thing, the same content, except I did it a little differently.
Okay.
And so I just did a really short paragraph. I'm teaching senior high school students customer service techniques. I have 90 minutes to complete the class. What specific customer service techniques and engagement tools should be used to inform and keep the students' attention? And so I got a teaching outline for 90 minutes that's broken down into 4 parts. And so between the two of us, I think it's kind of interesting to see what we'll come up with. And I actually just sent this to Jamie in an email. So yeah, I think it's really helpful. I mean, it included some ideas that we were already bouncing around, which
Right.
kind of is confirming and builds your confidence a little bit that, yeah, that's probably going to be worth including. So yeah, we came at it the same topic in 2 different ways with the prompt. And I think that's going to help us tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point about it's like it's nice to sanity check what you've already got when it does sort of, and lots of times if you'll, again, it's different ways. I've done it before too, where I say, you know what, I'm just going to go in with maybe a not so great prompt and sort of let it start. Like I feel like, again, like writing exercises are often like this, or even I've done proposals. I had a project proposal recently that I needed to do, and it was just like, man, like the getting started part is the hard part. So I sort of gave it a minimal prompt that wasn't so great, and then said, give me what you got, and then that sort of gave me the outline for what I was looking for. Pasted that into a Google Doc, sort of added my own, and we're talking about an hours long thing. I probably spent 2 or 3 hours on that. Then went back and sort of pasted that in and had it sort of refine it. So there's a bunch of different approaches, but it is nice to have that tool rather than you just, if I'd had to come up with all that on my own, it would have taken much longer. All righty, context is everything. So again, we've sort of talked about this. Context includes relevant information, and like I would have been interested, Cheryl, if it didn't sound like you gave it your role. You didn't tell it you were a cooperative extension agent, or maybe you weren't specific about that. That's another piece you could add to that, is sort of tell it what it is what your role is. Are you a high school teacher? Are you a cooperative extension agent? Are you a 4-H cooperative extension agent? So again, all of those things can sort of helps inform the tool and what kind of response you'll get back. Again, be as specific as you can about what you want. I talk about that a lot for the technology stuff that I teach my students. Ambiguity. I often use the terms. I probably overuse them. They get sick of hearing me say it, but be unambiguous. You need to be as unambiguous as possible. We talked about hallucinations earlier, but the more specific you are, and specifically the more unambiguous you are, then that's going to cut down on the chances of hallucinations or like, okay, that this is not, we're not the tool giving you something that's not relevant to what you're looking for. And again, the examples here, you can even include, hey, I want this many words, I want this many paragraphs. So again, you can be as specific as you like. Provide details about the kind of activity, complexity level, desired grouping. Again, all those things are going to help you manipulate the tool to give you what you want. Again, role. So you can, these are just some sample sort of examples you can use. I am a, you are a, act as a. I don't do the role playing thing a whole lot, but you can actually tell ChatGPT. In fact, I've got an example here if we got time. Yeah, we'll have time. We'll sort of play around with the role playing part. I don't do that a whole lot, but you can actually say, okay, ChatGPT, I want you to act like this person. It could be a historical person. It could be a character. It could be a role as you're an 8th grade teacher. I often, I guess, first person is what that would be. I often say, I am this, and I'm trying to do this, and then go that route. But some people, I think the role thing seems to work well for other folks to tell ChatGPT to act as a certain actor, to take on a certain role. And then roles could include, just as some examples here, teacher, principal, professional development writer, website designer. On the technology stuff, like, I do a lot of coding type things, and yeah, it just seems I don't feel like I need to tell it that if I'm asking it to write code for a website or a crawling script or something like that. I feel like I don't need to tell it it's a web developer or a software engineer. It kind of knows that based on the context. But anyway, it can be depending on the question you're asking and the level of detail you're giving it. It can sometimes be helpful to have the role. The expert level thing, I see that too, and that, I guess, that could be from a role standpoint. Again, the context matters if you're teaching 6th grade students versus high school students versus college students. But I often don't do the expert level thing. To me, if you're giving enough if you're giving it enough context in other areas, you don't need to necessarily tell it what level of expertise it needs. All righty. So we sort of gave you the previous one might have been more technical around like growing Christmas trees, but this is just an example of an administrative task. We helped. We sponsored NETSI last year, which is a national technology conference. So this is just an example of a sort of administrative task. I'm helping coordinate a national technology conference, and I need to create a Google form for the conference attendees. I need to get their name, organization they work for, t-shirt size. Can you create me a Google form with these questions and any others you think I might need for the conference? So you can think of this as like a conference registration form, right? And you sort of know all the things you need, but it's nice to, again, these are the kind of questions you can ask and, quickly be able to. And again, to me, the advantage here is it'll often there'll often be a couple of things that, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, this is something we need, or this is something that would be nice to have. All right, so let's do our role play. This one's kind of fun, so think of something fun. For this activity, we're going to ask your AI tool of choice to take on the role of. You will ask it questions, or I will ask you questions, and you will answer in the voice of. Stay true to the events of, and then answer one question at a time as I ask it. So let's try this. I'm going to leave this up on the screen. Let me go back, and then let me go. Sorry, I'm hitting the wrong. Right, let me leave this up so you can see it. And then if you can minimize and go to your AI tool of choice. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Let me get back to where I was. All right, here we go. So this can be a historical. I like to do like old sitcoms. So if there's a favorite maybe character, I think I'm going to do. I have an 80s sitcom or 80s show in mind. I'm going to ask it to take on the role of. And so you all do this. Let's take a couple minutes. In fact, I'll set my timer to 3 minutes again. And again, sort of have fun with it and follow this prompt that I've got here. And then maybe let's share what we could come up with. Okay. Go here. Okay. All righty. So hopefully you had some fun with this. I think it's a fun activity. I'm a fan of the 80s hit show Magnum PI. If you're of a certain age, you remember Magnum PI. So for this, this is my prompt for this activity. You will take on the role of Higgins in the 80s TV show Magnum PI. I will ask you questions and you will answer in the voice of Higgins. Stay true to the events of the show and only answer one question at a time. Ready? And then so it says, indeed, Magnum, I'm prepared, though I must warn you, my patience for your antics grows thin. Proceed with your inquiry, but do try and keep it concise. So if you recall, Higgins is a British gentleman, and so he has a sort of way about him. So I ask a couple questions. Where did you grow up at? And of course, he was British. And then so it mentions that. I asked if he served in combat. Sort of a shtick with the show was Higgins. He often liked to tell war stories, so it talks about that. So that's just sort of one example. Anybody else do anything fun that they'd be willing to share?
I put it in the chat, but I first had ChatGPT tell me about Einstein's theory of relativity in Einstein's voice. And then I told it to do it in Bill's voice from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but it did Bill and Ted and made it a conversation between the two. And it's pretty hilarious.
Okay. Yeah, well, like one of the things I noticed here, I went back and looked. So the way ChatGPT took this is that I was Magnum and I was asking him questions was really not what I wanted, and I didn't put that in. I mean, I went back and looked, so I don't. It just sort of can't. It just sort of came up with that all on its own. A- Anybody else?
I did Andy Griffith from the Mayberry show.
Yes.
And so it kept true to his voice
Okay.
of how he responded, and I just asked
Southern sort
odd
of, yeah,
questions.
Southern
Yeah.
charm, I guess, kind of thing.
Yeah, and reference the town and reference the characters, and so it was pretty good.
Yeah. Again, the breadth, that's why I say that, really, and again, I'll reference this when I talk about extension bots some. I mean, the technology itself, the AI part is cool, but the fact that it knows something about everything, and it's usually pretty like, not just something, but it knows a lot about everything. That is really what made ChatGPT blow up the way it did. And technology is often that way. It's not necessarily doing anything new, and in some ways, it's often not doing anything new. It's just doing it on a grand scale, and I kind of feel like that's what ChatGPT did. I mean, most of us before ChatGPT did not interact with AI that way. But again, if you talk to AI folks, the AI part of it was really not, there was nothing novel or there's nothing new there. Again, the fact that ChatGPT and OpenAI did it on the scale that they did was really what set them apart. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go back here. Slideshow. Okay. Don't stop with one prompt. Working with AI models is like having a conversation. It really is. I tell people again, that's this when I say it's not a silver bullet, that's the part of it. I mean, again, it is in a way, but it takes work, and it really is the old. We've all heard the old saying with computers about garbage in, garbage out. You have to give it good prompts and sort of good good feedback as you're sort of working back and forth to really get a good result in the end. So I've had, mostly, well, I've done it with writing tasks, certainly with coding tasks that I do. If I have a heavy technical task that I'm doing, I'll often carve out a 3 or 4 hour period to sit down and I'll sort of work with it. And it's, with coding tasks, it's a matter of me giving it good prompts, it creating code, then I'll put that into the development environment I've got, and I'll run it and test it and say, okay, let's tweak this, let's change that. So it's often this ongoing thing. I mean, the other thing is, these chats can be saved too. ChatGPT, it saves and archives your chat, so you have the ability to go back to them. So these can often be multi-day, multi-week, multi-month things. I mean, I've got conversations I've started using ChatGPT specific conversations, kind of like Google Docs, almost like a documentation sort of thing, but it also allows you the ability to go back and, things change or there may be new information you have. And so it can really be, these can be long lived conversations. New topic. Okay. If you don't know this is the real quick, trick. I mean, it was a couple of months before I realized that you could do this, but often when you're giving a prompt, this is some text, just know that you can do shift enter like this. And so it just helps from an organizational standpoint. If you've got more tech, if you've got a sophisticated prompt, I mean, I think the large language models and the tools also sort of look for prompts or breaks or carriage returns as part of the way they're processing the text. So I would encourage, if you don't know about that, it's one of those things I just didn't know that you could do it. But you can use shift enter to get a carriage return. So it often helps you. I know for me, whether I'm pasting text in or code, for the longest time I would ask a question, then you would paste it in and it goes right beside the question, and just from a human standpoint, you being able to read the prompt that you've given it, it just helps to be able to use that shift enter to add line breaks. Couple of examples here. We looked at the writing example I gave. Here's just an HTML example. I mean, if I go back, and you can see how long this conversation is. I mean, I've had multiple iterations of code here. This was the initial prompt that I gave. This is another tool. Merlin is a sort of a UI tool that helps manage the data we use for ExtensionBot. And so, I gave it this. This is the prompt that I gave it. It gave me some initial code. I came back and said I wanted to add some things. So often these are this is multiple pages here, and I'm not even sure if dates. I don't know. Does ChatGPT save dates? It doesn't. So I don't know how long I did this. But I think there was at least multiple days, if not weeks, where I was using that. Let's see. Attach a document. See the example. Yeah, I mean, I needed a letter of intent, and the letter of intent was very specific for Sloan for some grant. I can't remember if this was for a grant we were doing or what it was, but rather than trying to read through the document, I did read through it some, but I said, let me just upload this to ChatGPT and then ask it. The attached document is a letter of inquiry for Sloan Foundation. I'm interested in submitting a LOI to Sloan. Can you walk me through the steps of submitting, this letter of intent based on what it's asking for? I mean, I recently did this with a grant. There was a grant we were applying for. It was a 150-page grant. So I uploaded that. Again, not a silver bullet, but this particular grant, there was only a particular portion of the grant. So I prompted it. I uploaded the entire grant, but said, hey, we're applying for this data science piece. Walk me through the steps or give me the general steps I need to sort of, so it'll often, again, I still had to read a good portion. I'm not sure I read all 150 pages. I definitely read all of the part that was centered around the data science grant that we wanted, but again, just as a sanity check and to have an AI tool go through and read, it's helpful to have that. And then image generation is here too. I'm still amazed at sort of how poor at times the image generation can be. Warlock is the sort of overarching internal project name we have for ExtensionBot and some of the work we're doing there. So I prompted it to let's see, we're working on a new project for the Cooperative Extension Service. We call it Project Warlock. I would like a logo for the project. I like the idea of Warlock, but also if it could have some relation to ag and farming, that would be cool. Any ideas? And then it gave me some ideas, and then I followed up with another prompt, and then it gave me this, which was kind of dark and maybe is more sinister than I was looking for. But you can see the ag sort of part of it, right? But anyway, from time to time I'll play around with image generation things, and I went through a couple of different iterations here. This one I actually liked here. I think part of the prompt was to soften the image up and not make it quite as sinister. So all right, get better results. I've got a link in about this by chunking larger content. So instead of asking AI to write a story, start with an introduction instead of an essay. Try paragraph by paragraph. So again, depending on depending on sort of how large a document it is. I mean, the AI doesn't have an issue from an organizational standpoint, but we as human beings, number one, we've got our own preferences on sort of how we like to work. But if this is a larger document or sort of thing you're trying to build, often chunking it out, maybe give it the larger context for what you're trying to do and say, okay, let's start with the first part of this and sort of work on things that way. Ethical use every time. So I thought this was good. This is sort of thinking about ethics and AI in education. The E is for evaluate. So you evaluate the initial output to see if it meets the intended purpose and need. V is verify facts, figures, quotes, using and data, using reliable sources to ensure that there are no hallucinations or bias. E is edit your prompt and ask follow-up questions to have the AI improve its output. R is revise the results to reflect your unique needs, style, tone. And then Y is you. You are responsible for everything you create with AI. So always be transparent about how you've used tools. Citing, we're still trying to figure out it, and even I struggle a bit because again, if I use ChatGPT, but I always do final edits on things and I always tweak things. I never like copy and paste or I do copy and paste, but then I put it in Google Doc and then I make my sort of tweaks and edits to it. So I'm always, I go back and forth about how much attribution you should give, how much of it is yours versus AI. And I think honestly, we're still figuring that out. I know the MLA guidelines for citing information. There's AI, there's documentation for how you cite, based on the MLA standard, how you cite AI. As an example for my students, most in your college or university probably has an AI policy now too, but like we're required for all of our syllabus to have an AI policy. And generally what I tell students is it's okay to use it, but it's okay to use it unless I explicitly ask you not to. I've got a handful of assignments where I specifically ask them not to use AI, but that if you're heavily, I can't remember the exact verbiage I'm using, but if you're using it in a significant way, then at least sort of make a note about that. But at the end of the day, their work also part of my policy. What I say in my class is that the work you turn in should be yours. That's sort of the general. There's some ambiguity there as to what that means, but that's the sort of spirit I think of how AI should be used. Alrighty, that is all. I will stop there and I'll pause for questions or just observations or just this is, I mean, the fun thing about working in this field. And actually before I do that, I actually do want to talk about ExtensionBot real quick and the work we're doing there. How many sort of raise your hand or wave if you've used if you know about ExtensionBot? Yeah, okay, good. So ExtensionBot is our conversational AI tool. We are working with Thea Corporation. They're the contractor we're working with, and we have a large language model. We're using Llama is the model we're using now. And I like to talk about ExtensionBot in two ways. One is ExtensionBot, and then Merlin is the other piece. Merlin is the data platform that we're creating, and the goal is to have data sets from all 112 land-grant institutions. And basically, the data we're focusing on is things like fact sheets, publications. We're trying to sort of limit to those fact-based things, and we have a repository of data of all of those fact sheets, publications, and then we're training our large language model on that. And then of course ExtensionBot is sort of the visual tool that you're using to interact with it. If you go to you can go to chat, if you go to chat.extension.org, you can sort of see an example there. It can be implemented on your website. It could be everything we're doing here is free for use by land-grant institutions and cooperative extension services. You can implement it either by this little guy here that we call the widget. He sort of lives down in the lower corner inside your website, or we also have sort of a full screen, sort of feels like ChatGPT more. Full screen version of ExtensionBot. We have localization built into it's a configuration option. I won't get too far in the weeds, but for instance, and I actually went before this presentation because I didn't think I had a data set for Nebraska. We don't have a data set for Nebraska, but we will soon. And so the idea here is that, and for instance, I mean, I'll show you Oklahoma's implementation of ExtensionBot. We have a data set for Oklahoma. They have it embedded on their website, and basically there's weighting. You can think of it like weighting where we're actually more heavily weighting Oklahoma's data set. So anybody who interacts with ExtensionBot on Oklahoma's website, we go out and look for the best resource. Again, we more heavily weight Oklahoma's resources, so they're more likely to get a Oklahoma State Oklahoma State. They're more likely to get a response based on an Oklahoma State resource. But if a good resource for a particular topic can't be found within their state, then of course we search the entire corpus of data to return a response. So anyway, just a little about Extension Bot. I'll pause now for any questions.
Did you say Nebraska is moving forward with getting you all a data set?
I've not talked with anyone. We're crawling, so we're sort of doing sort of have a two-pronged approach. Either we're working with institutions to give us a data set. I don't think we've had any conversations with any Nebraska folks. So the other, if we don't have any communication or not talking with them, then we're going to crawl extension sites and get a data set that way. So.
My understanding, we're moving pretty cautiously.
Well, and that's fine. I'm not going to wait on institutions though, and we've had a lot of conversations with leadership about that. And in the beginning, at least leadership wanted us to be very cautious about pulling data from other sites. And I mean, my approach is that we're not going to do anything that Google and Microsoft and ChatGPT, OpenAI are not doing. We're going to go out and crawl websites the same way they are. Now we'll work with institutions if you want to create a data set for us and sort of curate specific data sets that you want to share with us. But to me, the power of the system and the value is going to be, again, just as I said with ChatGPT, is you really need this breadth of data for the value to be there, and we don't want any holes. There right now there's holes in the data sets we've got. When I say there's holes, there's states, and even from a regional standpoint, there's areas that we don't have a lot of data for. And so I want to make sure we've filled all of those holes and that we've got a complete data set for the entire cooperative extension service.
I know when I asked our tech person in December, he said they were exploring it, but that's all I've heard.
Yeah, and that's let me